when this game first came out back in 2001, I was in 5th grade, and then right around the time Wave 4, yeah, the 4th series came out, Two Towers, I would have been in 6th grade. One of the longer challenges I've given to myself is to try to build a deck with just the 4 Hobbits. And as the series go along, you start to get more resources, especially by the time you hit Mount Doom, and it's a strong possibility. But in a Fellowship block, it's very silly trying it out. That being said, this is a look at a deck that I have right now, which tries to fill in sort of those creative restraints where you can't use any other companion but these 4 who go to breed together. So I guess the first thing I should admit to is this is a creative challenge and not necessarily built to be competitive at, say, a tournament. So I know right away that this deck could be made better, absolutely, by the inclusion of just one more companion. For example, you know, Aragorn, or just a splashed Legolas Greenleaf. Even if you didn't include any of their weapons or anything like that, just having a companion with higher strength to rely on to bounce off of the minions would do great. You know, throw in a prancing pony or be able to play off of your opponents and things would go even further. But then you wouldn't exactly get the story that you have here. So I'm just gonna try this out and show you sort of what I've run into as I've experimented with this. So I think one of the core competencies of any Fellowship is its ability to get rid of minions, and that's one of the things that Hobbits have a really hard time with. They don't have any natural access to damage bonuses, and there are some wounding cards, but they add up kind of slowly. So the one card you get is Dagger Strike, which I will talk about when I get into the actual deck profile. But otherwise, your main source of getting rid of minions is, well, basically making it to the regroup phase and then stopping and waiting for them all to disappear, which is kind of obvious. But you can take advantage of the sight path. So what I've learned, at least with this deck, is to choose to go second and to take advantage of the sights as best as possible. I'm going to start with my companions here. I've got Frodo, Reluctant Adventurer, and he has the ability, of course, to make your artifacts, possessions, and tales played on him cost 1 less Twilight. So as I look at the deck, I'll show you where that comes in. The other choice would be the version of Frodo which heals allies, and that would be an option for this deck too, but I like that little bit of choke. Sam is one of the strong options in this deck. Obviously, Son of Hamfast is a popular choice because he can remove burdens, but again, in this deck, the idea is to go second, so we're not going to bid any burdens to start with. Sam, with his ability to become Defender +1 at will, combines really well with the stealth events, Hobbit Intuition and Hobbit Stealth, so he makes them twice as efficient through Sights 4 and then Sight 5. Merry is great when you put a weapon on him, just a Hobbit sword, get him up to Strength 7. We all know about that. It makes him sturdy and dependable. And then Pippin is here to protect your tails, which in this case would mostly just be, in fact would only be, there and back again. The fun thing about Pippin, though, is once you start to look at the minions you have out, he tends to be the companion I send out first and foremost, because if my opponent should happen to have something to cancel my stealth events, then it's okay for him to go. There is something to be said for having a companion you know is expendable, and it winds up being that Pippin sees some of the most battling out of the Fellowship. So there we are, and then I've chosen Isildur's Bane. Not that I particularly like adding 2 burdens instead of 1, but with only the 4 companions, one of the weaknesses we're going to run into, on top of many others, is the fact that we have 16 vitality across the board. The 1 extra vitality from Isildur's Bane is something, but also the chance to convert archery wounds into burdens could come in handy too. So it's there just to give ourselves a little more maneuverability against different shadow sides. So there's our fellowship, and that's what we're dealing with. We're not pulling anybody else out of the deck. So in the pursuit of getting rid of minions, we have 4 dagger strikes. And this says, make a Gondor or Shire companion bearing a hand weapon, strength +2 and damage +1. That's pretty simple. This gives you extra strength for surviving, against overwhelms, or if you get the chance to be stronger than the other minion, then the damage bonus is going to come in handy, and you might be able to knock someone off the board. Of course, in order to get Dagger Strike off, we have to have our hand weapons, so I'm going to run Sting, 3 Hobbit Swords, and 2 Frying Pans. We could be really, really redundant and have Sting with maybe 4 Hobbit Swords, but there comes a point where you need other space in the deck, and we don't want to be too redundant or the hand can get clogged. Sting is, obviously a great card. You can remove Twilight if there are orcs in your opponent's hand. This also gives you the opportunity to sneak a peek at what's going on during the regroup phase, so that can inform your decisions. 3 Hobbit Swords, I'm running this instead of 4, mostly to make extra space for the frying pans. This is again dependent on what you run into. Not everyone is running orcs. Uruk-hai are very strong, but if you do run into a swarm, this is a great card, and this is a rare opportunity in the Shire culture to access something to, again, wound or get rid of minions. So even if you're not necessarily going to run into a lot of orcs, the ability to have the chance to wound in case they show up is worth the inclusion. So there are our hand weapons, and we're pairing them with Dagger Strike. Then, because we're running the Hobbits, one of the strategies we have to pull into is the full playset of our stealth events, Hobbit Intuition and Hobbit Stealth. I mentioned Sam Proper Poet making these twice as efficient, so you become Defender +1, take on the 2 biggest minions on the other side, and at sites 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, he can get rid of 2 skirmishes, in a sense, with 1 card. There's not much else to say about that. Once you get past site 5, these become strength pumps, so they can coordinate with Dagger Strike, and then you get a little more opportunity to try to stack up against the strength of the minions opposing you. So we need those. Again, we're trying to stack strength, so I've got 3 copies of There and Back Again. These will pair with Frodo. You put them on, and they will cost 1 less. Gives every Hobbit strength +2 until the regroup phase, and Pippin will protect this from getting discarded by any shadow cards, so it can stay on there until you're ready to use it. I could include a 4th copy, but again, you don't want to be too redundant. It is unique, so it's stuck there for a while if you don't use it. And yeah, I guess that's all there is to say about that. Power according to his stature. We add a burden to wound each minion skirmishing the Ring Bearer. That's a great card. If I had more copies, I think I would include more of them. Again, rare opportunity for Shire culture to put on wounds. This can sneak up on an opponent too. You're up against a Yuruk Rager, they play Bred for Battle, they're trying to overwhelm Frodo. You can throw this out. Great at Site 9. For that Moria Swarm, you've got 3 Goblin Runners or what have you on Frodo. Throw that down and knock them all out. I like the Mithril Coat a lot for a few reasons. So, limited vitality, the ability to get rid of the archery total, to reduce it by 1, is possibly the difference between life and death for this fellowship. if you can draw it. Each minion skirmishing Frodo does not gain strength bonuses from weapons and loses all damage bonuses. That last bit is really good against Uruk-hai, of course. And then for strength bonuses from weapons, it's a good defensive ability. Most of the time, the Shire culture is on the defensive, but if you stack Frodo up with, you know, Sting, and you've used there and back again, and you've got your Mithril Coat, and one of your opponent's minions does have a weapon, there's maybe a sense in which Mithril Coat can be an offensive artifact, because you take that strength bonus away from the minion's weapon, and maybe Frodo has the chance to, again, get a higher strength than the opposing minion. So I think Mithril Coat is versatile and pretty awesome. And then, a talent for not being seen. Just a little bit of leaning into the choke strategy. Because we're not playing any extra companions, the choke is just going to happen naturally. I'm not leaning into it too hard. We do have Frodo, again, taking off from whatever you play on him, so you're not punished for playing multiple copies of There and Back Again throughout the game. You put on Sting, you put on Mithril Coat, he takes that away. And then we have this. I'm not running Build a Pony just because there are underground sites. My own adventure path uses an underground site at Site 4, so it just, I don't like having to get rid of him later. And finally, I've got 3 copies of Bounder and 1 of Fatty Bulger, Philibert. Bounder's awesome, we know that. One of the great things about him, too, is you draw him early, and if you don't need him, he can just wait until you're ready. Obviously, there are ways for allies to get discarded or wounded, but, you know, you have to live with that. Philibert Bulger gives you a way to cancel skirmishes beyond Site 5. So, again, against Fierce Uruk-hai or Nazgul, if you don't like the Fierce skirmish that you might be running into, you can exert a Hobbit twice and just cancel it. I think he's got a really good trick that way. So, a little bit about the strategy here. With these stealth events, you know, Hobbit Stealth and Hobbit Intuition, and Sam doubling up on them, and Pippin sort of poking his head out tentatively, I find from sites 1 to 5, not too many skirmishes even happen. So there are 2 stages to the game with this fellowship. The first 4 or 5 sites where you're ducking and bobbing, and then later on where you're just trying to survive. Honestly, Bounder is something that I haven't tried out yet. He hasn't been in the deck so far as I've played them, which seems very silly. There he is now. That'll help once you're stacking up your hobbits with your hand weapons and There and Back Again, and you get them to a decent strength, then of course he can increase what the opponents need to give your hobbits an overwhelm. And then, of course, with our weapons and our dagger strikes and these events becoming strength pumps later, you get a better chance at knocking minions out. With all that said, it's fair to assume that for the most part you're kind of running from behind with this deck, and although that seems a little weird because it's not competitive, it is part of the fun of the deck because you're trying to imagine what these 4 could do. So it feels like hiding in the shadows and just trying your best not to come into contact with the enemy at all. So that brings us to the point about the adventure path. We really want to take advantage of what we can. Worst case scenario, our opponent having win the bid makes us go first. So we throw down Hobbiton Woods, which says, exert a Hobbit to play your site too. So, unless you run into Larry Nellier, who can, of course, change sites on you, you're going to be playing Buckleberry Ferry. In this, while only Hobbits are in the Fellowship, there are no assignments and skirmish phases at the Buckleberry Ferry. This is a really good site for setting up your Fellowship. You're making your, well, you're allowing, basically, your opponent to go first, so you have an extra turn to draw Fellowship resources for yourself in case you don't have stealth events in the first place. But then if you don't have anything ready to go just yet, worst case scenario, you're here at Buckleberry Ferry and you just prevent all skirmishes from happening because these are your only companions. So you will not die on the very first turn. That's a guarantee. Even if Ullarinelli comes out, there's not enough shadow for him to make too much of a problem. I suppose a companion or two could die. But hey, if Nellier is the silver bullet that you're looking out for, then we're in a good spot. Alright, Frodo's bedroom. Play a Hobbit to draw a card. This keeps resources out of the opponent's hand for the most part. We don't have any extra companions to play, but play a Hobbit to draw a card will work with our copies of Bounder and Philibert Bolger, wherever he's gone. So we've got 4 cards in here that can trigger off of this. Card draw is very good. I don't want to go with a Council Courtyard where I can remove 2 when I'm moving off. Although that would be awesome for these guys, it's going to become a problem for my minions. And the truth is, if you're allowing your opponent to go first and you're using your own sites, it's really the minions who are going to be carrying the game strategically for you. I can say that I have won some games with this deck. Woohoo! Not by these guys. It was the minion side that had to do with it. So, Site 4, this hurts a lot because I've been talking about you need to find ways to get rid of minions. I was including Moria's Stairway for the games that I've played with this deck so far, which says each companion and minion bearing a hand weapon is damage +1. So the thought is you throw a Hobbit sword onto Merry, he's strength 7, he can knock out a Moria Scout, or maybe a Shaman shows up. To be fair, who plays the Urk Shamans? But throw down a Dagger Strike, he's strength 9. You've got this out there, he's damage +1, 2, you're throwing 3 wounds. It's great. What I've discovered though is, again, that stage to the game, sites 1 to 5, the skirmishes just aren't happening. You are canceling the skirmishes, or maybe your companions are dying. And this does have synergy with my shadow side. I should say it's Isengard Orcs, and I have some axes running in the deck. But because this just isn't as effective for the Fellowship, I've decided to go with a Site 4 that helps my Isengard Orcs even more, and that is the Mithril Mine. We get 1 more Twilight, and the Shadow ability says remove 1 to play a Shadow weapon from your discard pile. The great thing about that is, once I get into the Shadow side, but here's a sneak peek, these Isengard Axes, when you play this weapon, add 1. So, remove 1, play the Isengard Axe, refill that Twilight that you just took out. So I think that'll be a good synergy, and it'll help those minions sort of get ahead. I don't think we need to talk about Site 5. There's no choice. Site 6. When the Fellowship moves to Valley of the Silverlode, each Hobbit companion may heal. This is a kind of prototype for those circles that you get in Return of the King block, where if you move on during the regroup phase, you get to heal companions of a certain culture. Even better, this site, you get to do it once you move to the site in the first place, which means you can double down, stop at Valley of the Silverlode, having healed 1 from each of your companions, and then, of course, being at a Sanctuary at the beginning of your next turn, heal 5 more. So, with limited vitality in the Fellowship, this is a very good card. Site 7, again, limited vitality. While the Fellowship is at Anduin Wilderland, skip the archery phase. This is also really good for those Isengard Orcs who want their vitality for later to be able to exert during the regroup phase, so this covers for them too. This is a chance for the Fellowship side and the Shadow side to really agree on what they want out of a site. So I like this one a lot. Anduin Banks, this is for my Shadow to bully the opponent's Fellowship, but for each companion in the Fellowship over 4, add 2 to the minion archery total. There are no companions over 4, so we should be good. No extra minion archery coming at them. but hopefully we're shooting a lot over at the other guys. Finally, Site 9. If you're playing this, it has nothing to do with these guys. I mean, I suppose you can run deck with Thrower's Map, or if you're running Rangers, you can use Pathfinder and control what kind of Site 9 you want. We're not. So this is just all about once the opponent's fellowship gets to Site 9, we want to be able to use our Isengard Orcs. I'm not sure which is better, the Waste of Emyn Wheel or in the Two Towers, the same sort of version of the site for the Isengard Orcs, which says that the fellowship only wins if they survive until both players reconcile. This has a limit on it. You have to spot 4 companions and exert your orc to make the Free People's player wound a minion during the maneuver phase. But the sort of hidden limit in that is you can keep wounding them essentially until they have just 3 companions left. So this sets up for a very good swarm if you've got enough of your Isengard Orcs out there. This is the natural card to play with them. This is just really good. For these sites, which are fellowship-oriented, the good thing is, while they're helping our hobbits, you know, no assignment or skirmish phases here, playing a hobbit to draw a card, these don't put a dent in my shadow side at all. I could run into an opposing fellowship that's just running hobbits, but my Isengard Orcs are going to be able to exert during their group phase anyways, so they'll get what they want out of that. It is still somewhat frustrating not to get the chance to fight. That's admittable. Frodo's Bedroom, play a hobbit to draw a card. Again, this is preferable to allowing my opponent's fellowship to remove 2. And then Valley of the Silverlode. This is going to give, my opponent's Frodo a chance to heal, and maybe they've got Sam. A lot of decks do. So that would give him a chance to heal too. That does run against the Isengard Orcs wounding strategy, but it's good enough for the fellowship's sake to include. And then these 2 sites are just, they agree with both sides, especially this one. I guess this is more about just not hurting them. So when you have a limited set of resources for your fellowship, I think it's good to just try to get your sites on the table and control the adventure path. And the easy way to do that is just bid 0. And your opponent is almost always going to choose to go first. If they force you to go first, the reward is you get to go first with having bid 0 burdens. So yay. And again, we have that Hobbits and Woods, so if we're forced to go first, we can still play Buckleberry Ferry and cover for ourselves for that contingency. So, putting these guys away for a second, Isengard Orcs. The strategy here is basically survive with as much vitality as possible through the regroup phase to be able to exert and make the Free People's player wound a companion. There is something really nice baked into these characters. Because they want to exert during the regroup phase, they're given naturally a bunch of vitality, so it's going to help them survive really well against archery just very naturally, which means they don't need a lot of tech to protect against that. These are the Isengard Orcs that I'm running, and that is kind of a small number. The idea here is to try to let them win skirmishes so that you're wounding during the skirmish phase and also protecting your vitality. And then, again, you get to exert during your group phase. So I'm running all 4 copies of Isengard Worker, Isengard Servant, and Isengard Retainer. They all have the same regroup special ability, Strength 8, Strength 7, Strength 5. The Isengard Worker is a little sad, but there's usually space in the deck for having a minion who doesn't cost a lot, at least to help you cycle, and maybe he can stack up with the skirmish bonuses that you give yourself. You also have Orc Commander over here, who has the same ability, plus he makes each other Orc Strength +1. Isengard Warrior can wound in the regroup phase. Well, he can only exert people during the regroup phase. If the opponent's Ring Bearer has 3 wounds, already, but he can also protect you against archery special abilities. Again, with 3 vitality on everyone and 4 vitality on this guy, I'm not too worried about, say, Legolas Greenleaf or the splendor of their banners, but I am worried about the Yuruk Slayer. So, with these guys in place, I just don't want to run the other orcs who are kind of weak and can't help you win skirmishes. So, to supplement what I've got with the Isengard orcs, I'm running Yuruk High Raiding Party and Yuruk Slayer. There's not any support cards in here for these guys in particular. I think they mesh well with the orcs because they have a lot in themselves already. The raiding party has 3 vitality, so you're again soaking up archery wounds, and if you pair these guys with your Isengard orcs, they can become the pin cushions for the opponent's archery so that you have vitality left during the regroup phase. The Yuruk Slayer can take advantage of any twilight you have left, so even without Bread for Battles, or Savagery to match their numbers, or Saruman's Ambition, or any, Yuruk High Sword, I'm forgetting their weapon. None of that in here. These guys can still pack a punch by relying on the Twilight and maybe getting up to Strength 12. Yuruk Slayers are great. They do have 2 Vitality, so they're not going to get sniped too easily. There's a chance this guy might protect them, but I'm not running too many of him because he can't always put in the hurt. Since this deck is running Isengard Orcs, I'm running a full 4 copies of Isengard Axe and a full 4 copies of Servants to Saruman, so that, again, as best as I can get through that skirmish phase and actually wound during the skirmish phase and protect vitality. It's always good to have skirmish bonuses too in case of surprise overwhelms, or I guess I'm not too worried about them getting overwhelmed. But Isengard Axe, again, will stack really well with that Site 4. You can pull it from your discard pile and add one as you do. Servants to Saruman, that's just the one skirmish event you get with the Isengard Orcs at this point in the game. I've mentioned that I've played a few games with this deck and had some victories. These guys can carry it pretty well. They are a lot of fun. I like seeing the wounds stack up. That Site 9 is a really nice surprise and works well for them. I had in a previous version 1 copy of card whose name I'm forgetting, but discard such and such Isengard Orcs to make the Free People's Player wound X companions. I've gotten rid of it to include the 4th copy of the skirmish event. I just want to get through the skirmishes as best as possible, so I see this as more valuable. These, of course, also cost 0, so there's a lot of cost efficiency in this deck. It's not necessarily going to hold up to a choke deck, ideally. Obviously, this is not like Goblin Runners and Goblin Sneaks and Backstabbers and that sort of thing, but they are beefy, they have plenty of vitality, and they work well. So, that's my deck as it stands. I'd love to try it out in the near future too. A few final thoughts. We've got 31 cards here, 31 in the Fellowship. In the version I've run before, it's 30-30. I had managed to get it down to exactly the minimum. And the reason I like doing that is especially for the stealth events we're running with our Hobbits. They just rely on them so much. And if you're down to the bare minimum, you're increasing your chances of drawing them. But in this version, I've gone up to 31 because there are just too many single cards that I want to invest in. I really like Filbert Bulger. He's a good surprise. A Talent for Not Being Seen is definitely worth having out there. Mithril Coat is good. Power according to his stature. So these one-ofs, I can't get rid of them. And then Dagger Strike, full honesty, it's really hard for the Hobbits to win skirmishes. It's hard for them to get there. So you don't get to use the damage bonus, like, hardly ever. With that being admitted, there's no point in beefing up your characters if you're not at least going to give yourself the opportunity to capitalize. The number of decks I've played against with this one has been limited so far, so I'm keeping this in. We've got to keep that gasoline there in case we can light the spark, fuel the fire. So the deck runs 31-31, and if that's a mistake, I guess I'll find out in the near future. Hey, thanks for watching, and have a good night.